there any relevance of native speaker norms? That's a question for TEFLologists. Is it better to focus on form or to focus on forms? That's a question for TEFLologists. If you use a textbook, is your classroom authentic, or should your approach be more learner-centric? From feedback to learner autonomy, we'll discuss it all on TEFLology.
Hi, I'm Matthew.
I'm Rob.
And I'm Matt.
And welcome back to the TEFLology podcast, a podcast all about teaching English as a foreign language and related matters, presented by three self-certified TEFLologists.
TEFL News. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about something that's been in the news. We're recording this 1 week after the Brexit vote in the UK, where the UK voted to leave the European Union. And we're going to discuss some of the effects that this could potentially have on the world of TEFL, on language teaching, which is obviously what everyone's the most concerned about.
Of course, yes.
Yeah. Well, first of all, what do you guys think in general of the Brexit decision?
My immediate reaction is that I'm upset that my passport will no longer be a European passport.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just purely selfish reasons.
Right.
Yeah.
But the vast majority seem to agree that leaving would be bad for the economy, not just the British economy, but the worldwide economy.
Yeah.
So
Who cares about that?
I would go along with them. Most of the reaction to people who voted to remain seems to be, and maybe understandably, very emotional. Just, I think, symbolically what it means to say we no longer want to be part of Europe, the European Union. But we'll see what it actually means.
Yeah. So a few people have already had or written a little about how this could affect the language teaching industry, particularly in Europe. So Alex Case on the TEFLtastic blog, he wrote a short little bit about it. Some of the ELT people have written about it kind of informally.
TEFLgeek.net. There's also been some articles on the EL Gazette's magazine website. One of the ramifications of leaving the EU is that English might not be the sole language of the parliament anymore.
Yeah, well, I mean, it isn't anyway. Like,
No,
it doesn't have an official language, but it's sort of become the de facto language, as it has sort of around the world. Right. It's become the de facto language.
I think every language that's an official language of any EU member state is an official language of the EU.
Yeah, but the ones that are used most are English, French, and German. With English, like, way above those two. But there have been hints. I think maybe Angela Merkel said that, or someone, I can't remember exactly, but someone said that English is, now going to not be used as much, and other things are going to be.
There were some kind of alarmist headlines immediately after the vote saying, English is going to be dropped as one of the official languages of the EU, conveniently forgetting about our Irish brothers and sisters.
Right.
Yeah. And the Scots, of course.
Yeah.
Do you think that will actually happen, though? Do you think that they'll just not banish English, but they'll favour other languages?
It's really hard to know, because you would imagine that. I don't know any statistics or anything about this, but I imagine that even like amongst French and German and Italian and Spanish, etc., people, English is probably still used as the lingua franca.
Yeah.
So I guess the big question, and if you think about it, this would actually make it even more appropriate as a lingua franca if it's not the first language of any of those people. If it were no longer, maybe Merkel's pushing for German.
Right.
But which doesn't necessarily seem fair.
Yeah, I think. From my perspective as someone who's kind of in the critical camp in ELT, I think it almost might be kind of a good thing. There have been some little things going around Facebook about this, another nail in the coffin of native speakerism. And not just in terms of English not being used as much, but in terms of British English being seen as normative. You might get these other versions spoken in other countries gaining more prominence.
European English.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think it could be, in a way, it could be positive. It could make things a bit more egalitarian. Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. Like I said, it's a more suitable lingua franca if it's not the first language of anybody involved.
Do you mean it's more suitable given that there's no kind of
again, not to forget our Irish.
Do you mean like it's more suitable given that it won't have the what's the word, political baggage attached to it. Like,
Yeah.
not being official means that it will be used more. Yeah, you say egalitarian, perhaps.
Yeah, I think it's also that, like, I mean, if you think about, you know, in Europe you've got one country that not to forget our Irish, but you've got England where, you know, people don't have to learn a foreign language, and they've got all these other countries that do, and they're all kind of, you know, focused on the British English norms, that kind of thing. So I think in that sense it's more equal.
Yeah.
Right.
So probably, you know, currently, if not currently anymore, but up to a week ago, when they were all using English, they're probably, you know, slightly aware of Cameron, or, you know, the British delegate, thinking, oh, they're the one who, you know, it's their language basically, and now they won't feel that pressure anymore.
Right.
Yeah. Do you think that the question about language has ever really come into this debate? I don't know if, I think this is quite a minor, I know this is a TEFL-based podcast, and for us it's quite important, but in the wider picture, has this come in?
So, yeah, actually, so Robert Phillipson, the linguistic imperialism guy, he wrote a book in 2003, I think, called English Only Europe, which is all about challenging European language policy. And not just in the European Union, but just in terms of European countries, European education systems, that kind of thing. Just the idea of language policy. So language has been an issue in Europe, and obviously countries like France have always been trying to promote their own language instead of English. Yeah. So there is quite a lot of wresting for power in terms of language within the EU.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that I wonder if the rise of English as a global language internationally, what the connection that is to English as the kind of lingua franca of Europe.
Yeah.
Did the two happen at the same time? Did one happen because of the other, etc.?
Yeah.
So maybe on a more practical note, something more relevant just for your regular teachers. There is some concern that teachers will now not be able to move freely, or at least UK teachers won't be able to move freely around Europe. It's going to be much more difficult to get jobs, which is kind of bad for those teachers. But on the other hand, it might level the playing field out for, say, Americans who want to travel and teach, or people from any other country. You know.
Yeah. That is an interesting question. When I worked in Europe, I had American friends who often would ask about, how easy would it be for me to come over and get a job? It's not easy at all. Basically, you can't. The only Americans I knew who worked in Europe had European passports.
So you're saying this might make it easier now that we're not in the EU?
Easier for Americans. Easier for non-European.
Non-European, yeah.
Right, I see. Yeah.
So the European countries, when they are hiring teachers to teach in language schools or wherever, I guess that'll maybe lead on to the next question, but the big question about native speakers, and if that still will be the preferred model.
Right.
I get a feeling that now that we've left the EU, or now that we're going to leave the EU, less. Right now, it doesn't seem to be the case because the pound's quite weak. So a lot of students are going to probably come into the EU, the UK, and capitalise on the weak pound. But in the long term, I think students are going to look elsewhere and find more attractive, like places, cheaper, more affordable places to go. And that could change the face.
Why do you think so?
I think fees will perhaps rise. There won't be as many. It won't be as fair for previously EU students. The prices will change in comparison, and they might decide to go elsewhere because of that.
But a lot of international students in the UK don't come from the EU. They come from other places like China, Japan. If the pound's weak, it might actually encourage an increase in students from those areas.
For example, like there's a lot of summer programs that take place in the UK. A lot of young students come over for the summer. Do you think that their parents are going to decide not to send them to the UK?
I think for them it won't really make much difference, to be honest.
Because they're all rich anyway.
Yeah, because they're all rich, and like Rob said, a lot of students come from outside the EU. Yeah. I think maybe, I'm not 100% sure about this, but my feeling is that for like university tuition, obviously, I think the tuition fees for EU students versus non-EU there's a big difference there. So generally, students mostly from Asia and East Asia, a lot of them study in British universities, but they pay a much higher tuition rate than students who come from within the EU. So in that case, I think maybe there would be less EU students.
Right.
For them, the price may go up.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. In comparison to what it is now, it would rise.
Right, and maybe for universities. For language schools, I don't think it would make a difference.
Well, I don't know. I'm pretty sure that's another question I had. Will language schools have to reevaluate, the amount of teachers they need, given that the amount of students may first increase and then decrease, perhaps, and maybe they might have to change their whole model and like pricing, like strategy or that kind of thing. Like, I think it will affect them. Right?
Yeah, I wonder. When I worked at language schools in London, I mean, it was a small language school anyway, so the numbers changed a lot depending on the season.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So we were always taking on people and letting people go. But yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah. Well, I think it's going to be interesting to see whether that does change. In terms of teachers, so a lot of British teachers now go out and teach in Europe.
Yep.
Do you think that there will be a redirect of where these teachers are going? So, for example, out of Europe into Asia, perhaps.
Sure.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
And what effect do you think that would have? Because at the moment, I think it's not much of a secret, but in Asia, teachers tend to not be hugely qualified quite often. You tend to get a lot more sort of backpacking teachers, I think, in Asia. Whereas in Europe, they've had like the systems of like the kind of systems that the British Council and other big schools have set up, where everyone's got certificates and diplomas and that kind of thing. So, do you think we might see a growth in sort of professionalism in other areas because
I'm not sure about that. Well, I mean,
it's just a possibility.
Yeah, it is. Yes. Yeah. I hadn't really considered that. That's another thing I hadn't considered. But there will be movement, though. Like, there might be less free movement within Europe, but it might mean that teachers are going to freely move to Asia, like you say, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's still the case. When I was starting my language teaching, the most popular post-CELTA destination was Poland. A lot of people I knew went.
I was going to go there originally.
Yeah. But it's a question. I don't know if that would change now. I guess it comes back to that question of is it going to be a lot harder for British citizens to get work visas in the EU? Yeah.
Well, I mean, if organisations like the British Council have kind of been the centre of European ELT,
right?
What changes is it going to bring if Britain isn't in the EU anymore?
Yeah.
Yes, I have the British Council press release here that was written by the Chief Executive of the British Council.
Who's that?
I wasn't going to say the name because Kieran, isn't it? Kieran Devane. All right, I'll say it again.
Ian Council, that's his name.
Okay, I'll say all that again. Okay. I've got the British Council press release here, which was written by Sir Kieran Devane, the Chief Executive of the British Council, and I'll just read it out to you, see what you make of it. As the UK's international organisation for cultural relations and educational opportunities, the British Council has been working with our European neighbours for over 80 years, and we will continue to do so. We have always believed in the strength of engaging with multilateral institutions, and we find ways to continue to work in partnerships with other European countries and with EU institutions to create opportunities, build connections, and engender trust.
Well, that was a bit of contentless waffle, wasn't it? It sounds like a lot of the contentless waffle that's come out after the vote. I mean, basically people who don't know what's going to happen.
Generally, we're committed to whatever's going to happen, basically. Yeah.
Whatever happens will also be happening alongside it.
Yeah. It was similar to the thing that Boris Johnson wrote recently, saying, it'll still be the same. Everything will be fine. Yeah. Nothing's going to change.
But it adds to this this feeling that nobody really knows, to be honest. Even institutions like the British Council,
of course,
don't know.
Well, but I mean, literally nobody knows, because
even self-certified TEFLologists don't know. And for the people who occasionally complain that our podcast contains too much speculation, you must be loving this episode.
Yeah, this is our speculation special.
What do you think? I mean, this has come up very rarely, but occasionally some of my students will say, "Oh, how about the Brexit then? How about that?"
Right. How do you address it in the classroom?
How do you think that's played out in classrooms the world over, where there's a British teacher or British students involved? Like,
well, in my classes at least, so in Japan, where the students don't have that much of a connection, they didn't really know about it. They weren't that aware of it. Although in my British culture course, they were, and They asked me some questions about it, and I said, well, we've got 3 weeks left. I've decided to change the final module to be on this topic. So for me, it's actually been kind of a teaching opportunity. Yeah, but I would assume that the conversations would be rather more awkward within the EU.
Right. You mean like in France or Spain, like students kicking the teacher out of the classroom?
Right, yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay, right. So, yeah, do you think that would actually happen, though? Like, the students would turn on the teacher? I'm pretty sure.
I don't think so.
Well, this is what I was saying. Do you think that everyone associated with ELT would necessarily have voted for a Remain vote?
No.
And why do you think some people would have voted for a Leave vote?
I know one person associated with ELT who voted Leave, but he lives in Asia, so it doesn't really affect him. And I think he's just politically in favour of that. Yes, exactly. Right. Yeah.
Because I would have thought that. I just would have thought that a vote to Remain would benefit people within the ELT industry.
I mean, yeah, but that's the thing, we don't know really. Yeah, I think so. Like getting back to that idea of what the status of British citizens working in Europe is going to be. It may be that because it's an issue for British citizens to work as easily as they do now in the EU, European countries may turn to non-native speakers more to teach their courses. Do you think that's a possible consequence, and how do you feel about that?
Because they're better on like cost performance, they're cheaper.
Because they don't have to go through the process of getting a visa for them, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think it's likely to happen like that, but I'm not sure, because I mean countries in Asia haven't turned to that model. They've relied very heavily on importing people from other countries.
Yeah,
and they didn't have the partnerships and stuff like the European Union did. So I don't know. I think wait and see.
Do you think it will make learning in Britain or learning from British people, this is maybe a stupid thing to say, more prestigious? Is that the right word?
I see what you mean.
Because we're outside of the EU, people are going to want to pay more, and that's going to somehow be linked to quality over time. And
what I'm not
again.
Yeah. Do you think there's any, I don't know if anger is the right word, but any frustration from just the people of Europe? Like not obviously the leaders express their strong desire for the UK to stay. Yeah. Although they can't wait for us to leave at this point, as far as I can tell.
I've got a lot of Swedish friends, and
good for you.
Unanimous. That's all I want to say. That's it. How about you? No, unanimously, they've all said it's terrible that the UK is leaving. Obviously, Sweden and the UK have always got.
But are they angry with the UK for that, or do they just?
How do they feel about Norway never joining?
Well, I don't know about that, but yeah, they seem to have done it right though.
Right. But do you think? I mean, maybe like you were saying, do you think the somebody looking to learn English is maybe more likely to look to America or somewhere else?
If they're not already.
Well, again, I think it just comes down to the price. Will the UK leaving the EU mean that the price is more comparable to going to the US or cheaper going to the US?
I mean, that just depends on how bad the economy gets.
Sure,
yeah. Well... So as we mentioned before, there may be this, European English or Euro English that arises, which may be something that one day English people have to go to language classes to learn.
Yeah, well, although people said that about English as a lingua franca, and that didn't really happen.
Right.
Yet.
Yeah. That would be more exciting though, to see Euro English or whatever they want to call it evolve into something much different.
Right.
And do you think that now or soon we won't be in the EU? Do you think we'll be outside of that discussion? If academics got together I think this will happen over like hundreds of years, but perhaps organically Do you think that there'll be this new kind of Euro? Well, first of all, what do you mean by Euro English?
So apparently there was even a thing. There was an EU publication, like an official EU report called "Misused English Words and Expressions in EU Publications."
Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay.
So and maybe this is playing into the hands of people who wanted to leave in terms of talking about all these regulations that the EU put together. But they identified like a bunch of terms which they thought were being incorrectly used, etc., and maybe trying to kind of codify some kind of English as a lingua franca, basically, for Europe.
So my question now is, now that the UK would be out of the EU, would they be out of those discussions?
Yeah,
on terminology, in-house Parliament terminology.
Although at the same time, those kind of attempts to put some kind of
to codify language.
Yeah, to write it down, say this should be used like that, etc. Yeah. Never work. The Académie Française has been doing that for a while. It has some success, but it generally doesn't work.
Yeah.
Okay. What about the word Brexit itself then?
I think it's the worst portmanteau. Portmanteau? How do you say that?
Manteau.
Okay, manteau.
TEFL Cultures.
Okay, for our TEFL Culture segment this week, we are talking with Jo Gakonga. Is that a good
yeah, that's
attempt at your name? Okay.
Yeah, Gakonga. Yeah, it's just how it sounds.
Okay, great. So first, Jo, thank you very much for talking to us today.
You're very welcome.
Thank you. And just to start, if you could maybe introduce yourself, just give us a brief history of your career as a teacher trainer, etc.
Okay, so I started teaching in 1989, sort of backpacker, fell into it in Taiwan, and then have got a few qualifications since then, and currently work at Warwick University on the MA in ELT programme, and I'm a CELTA trainer as well. And in the interim time, I worked for a long time overseas, so in Europe, in the Czech Republic and Switzerland, and in Africa a little bit, in Kenya, and in Asia, mainly in Taiwan, only in Taiwan actually. And also in the UK. I trained to be a primary school teacher at one point and then ran screaming back to adult ed. And started teacher training in 2000. So did... start off with workshops and what have you. I worked in Australia as well for a couple of years. Mm-hmm. That's where I did my Delta. Mm-hmm. And then as I became a CELTA trainer in 2000, did Trinity Cert TESOL before that for a year.
Okay.
And then, as I say, sort of did that. I've got 3 kids, so that sort of took up quite a lot of time in those interim years. Mm-hmm. And then when my youngest one started school, I decided I wanted to do an MA, so did that part time for a couple of years, and that kind of led then on to the job that I've got now.
Okay, great, thank you. So you're here today mainly to talk about a new website that you've created.
Yeah, so when I did the MA, I got really interested in the power of the internet for teacher development generally, and started one website at that point. That's about 4 or 5 years ago, ERTtraining.com, which was aimed at CELTA trainees, really, particularly, and novice teachers. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of methodology and a grammar for language teachers, for native speakers who didn't know what a preposition was. Mm-hmm. So it sort of gained some skills that way in making videos, basically.
Okay.
Screencasts.
It was all video based?
Yeah, it's pretty much all video based, actually. I mean, that is it. So I just like this idea of the fact that if you make these screencast videos, it sounds as if it feels to people as if it's a very personal way of learning. And I did my MA research on sort of developing that grammar course, because my original thought was that online virtual classroom in real time, that would be the best way to learn, that people being together and being collaborative would definitely be the best. Mm-hmm. And people just didn't show up. So I did the course, and I prepared it all, and loads of people signed up. I had 100 people who wanted to do it, and then 4 would turn up
oh, really?
at the right time, So then I started making videos of the content and putting that up instead. Mm-hmm. And people did, access that, and they said, oh, yes, this is better because not just for the convenience, although clearly that was a big part of it, but also just pedagogically, they could go at their own pace, they could watch it as often as they liked and all that sort of thing. Right. So that's where I got the idea really of making videos for learning, for teacher learning. And then last year I started a PhD. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's a foolish thing to have done or not, but I have done. I'm planning on doing it part-time, so I've got a long time to do it. But the main focus of that is that we have I'm interested in what happens when teachers become teacher educators or teacher trainers, because I think often that's, people fall into it. Right. And they don't necessarily get any training along the way. You're a good teacher, and so you get an opportunity to train other teachers.
Was that your experience?
To some extent, I kind of had a mixed experience. So I had, I was interested in progressing and and developing my career, I suppose. So the school that I worked in at the time in Australia it was really good. I did my Delta there, and they had regular CPD, a lot of which was run by either the Delta training team or, other teachers. Mm-hmm. So I did some workshops and volunteered for that. And then when I came back to the UK, I started working at Solihull College, which is a fairly big FE college, and got the opportunity. They ran CELTA there and had the opportunity then to train to be a CELTA trainer, and that does have a particular training course. You shadow a course, you make a portfolio, you shadow mark assignments and TP and various things. So there is support there in training, and then obviously as you're going on in your first courses, you get and later courses. There's a lot of collaboration between the trainers, so you do get a lot of support. But I think particularly with feedback, that there's not, it's often done behind closed doors. You don't get a lot of people watching you, especially after, I did initially on this teacher trainer in training course for the CELTA, but after that, you're pretty much left to get on with it. Yeah.
Just when you say feedback,
So when you're giving feedback to trainees, so post-lesson observation feedback, they've done their lesson, you've watched it, and then you give them feedback on it. Okay. And that is, it's really tricky. Yep. It's, I think for my money, it's the most difficult thing that I do professionally. Yeah. Yeah. Because it's always different. You've got different people that you're dealing with, and it's quite face-threatening. They're in a vulnerable position. They've taught, so it's quite, and you've watched them, so that's quite difficult to start with. Yeah. So they're feeling a bit nervous about it, especially if it didn't go well. Then they're probably beating themselves up about it. Yeah. You're doing it in quite a public space because in CELTA it's peer feedback as well as tutor feedback. Yeah. And so, and where you pitch that, how much you say, how much you make it a more dialogic approach, how much advice you're giving them or how much you're expecting them to reflect, how they feel about it, what kind of person they are. Some people really like direct feedback and they want to know, just tell me what it is. And some people, clearly that's going to be devastating for them if you're too direct. The relationship you have with them personally, the interpersonal skills you have. So all these things, there's so many factors involved, and it's difficult, I think, to really get it right, and you don't get much feedback on your feedback. It's very rare that people watch you and say, oh, well, have you thought about this or whatever. So that's my experience. And so the PhD is about looking at the interaction of novice mentors in mentoring interactions and in feedback both. Okay. and sort of seeing what happens and trying to develop a sort of a training module or to help people to develop their feedback. So as part of that, as sort of an impact for that, I suppose, I thought it would be interesting to have a wider audience and to sort of have a conversation with a wider group of people about feedback. Mm-hmm. So I started this website, so I've just launched it last month, and it's called teacherfeedback.org. And the plan is that, I feel like, I've got no warrant to tell anybody what to do. I've been training for a while. That doesn't make me necessarily, the expert. But I think that what it would be interesting to do, what I hope it'll be interesting to do, is to just put up sort of a monthly video with some kind of spark for thought, really. What do you think about this? Mm-hmm. And encourage people to discuss it. So that's the plan, anyway.
Great. It's a topic I'm very interested in because it's a part of the job that I do. Mm-hmm. Do you have a particular model you follow when you give feedback post-observation?
Well, my feeling is that it should be a forum for reflection. So I would try to make it as dialogic as possible. And my feeling is that you're going to give people written feedback as well. Mm-hmm. And that gives you an opportunity to say, look, this is what I think. Yep. So my main sort of principle, I suppose, mm-hmm. is to try and ensure that oral feedback is a space for discussion and not sort of transmissive learning, not just telling them what you think they should be doing. Yeah. But that's not always easy, Yes. Because and again, I think that's where these balances come into play, because a lot of trainees, especially if they're pre-service trainees, they don't really know. Yep. Yeah. So they quite often, you say, well, tell me what you think, and they just tell me what you think. Right. You're the teacher, you're the trainer, tell me what you think. I want to know what to do. Yeah. And so I think making that not a kind of a frustrating guess what's on my mind game mm-hmm. Yep. is also, I don't know, do you find the same sort of thing?
I find exactly the same thing. And like you said, it depends so much on all those variables you're talking about in terms of how much experience they have and their personality and your relationship with them, mm-hmm. and trying to kind of read that in the moment, and give them. I follow a similar kind of principle in terms of if I can, obviously without it not being too convoluted, if I may have an idea of where I want them to, kind of go in terms of reflecting on the lesson. Mm-hmm. But if they can get there on their own without me being too direct about it, that's preferable. Yeah. But then, like you say, I have gotten feedback from instructors that I've observed and said, I wasn't sure, what you thought about the lesson. Mm-hmm. And the response that you want to give is it's less important what I thought, it's more important what you thought. But they don't always see it that way, like you said.
Yeah. So it's interesting. So that's you've had feedback on your feedback on that aspect.
A little bit, yeah. The institution where I work, we try to get feedback from our instructors that we're training as much as possible, and they have an opportunity to do that. Part of the process also is that they start by doing a written self-reflection. Yes. And as part of that self-reflection, they can ask questions to the trainer who's going to observe their lesson.
Yeah, we do the same sort of thing, yeah.
Yeah, and so those questions, again, a lot of the times I just, the questions are direct, as in, mm-hmm. what did I do wrong here, or what would you do in this situation? Yes. And I don't want to answer those questions. I want to turn mm-hmm. it back on them. Yeah. But as you say,
it's a difficult one, isn't it? Because it's getting that balance between, not. I mean, it's just like with learners, when you're trying to elicit, you're trying to elicit from them, well, what's whatever it is. Mm-hmm. But if they don't know, you've just got to kind of tell them at some point.
Exactly.
And I mean, I suppose trying to generate an atmosphere where you're saying, well, look, there are lots of ways to do this. Nobody knows there's not one way to teach a language. There are lots of different ways, and different ways will work with different people and contexts and whatever. So these are some suggestions. You can take them or leave them, or but the difficulty, of course, if you're on a pre-service course, is that there are certain criteria they do have to take on board and show that they consistently do, or at least convincingly do. That's right. So I think those things are difficult, and again, it's different when you're talking to pre-service teachers and in-service teachers, where with in-service teachers, presumably you've got they already have the basic skills in place, and so you can go more down the sort of reflective route. But with pre-service teachers, I still think it's important that you try to develop some kind of ability to reflect in them. And for some people that's quite easy, and for some people it really isn't.
So there it's more about giving them a tool that they'll be able to use throughout the rest of their teaching career.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that's what I say to you. We're going to watch you and give you observation for 6 hours or whatever on CELTA, and after that, nobody's probably going to watch you. Well, once a year perhaps. But you may well work in a school where you're not observed very much at all. And so really the best thing you can do is have some idea of what you are doing and be aware of it. And I suppose the same thing's then true for, at any stage in your career, also as a trainer. And that's what I'm hoping. So that with this first video blog that I put up this month, what I'm encouraging people to do is to audio record their feedback and to listen to it and perhaps transcribe a bit. I know transcribing is it's a lot of work, but even a little bit of it, because I think that's one of the things I've really have come across in the last few years is the power of transcripted information. You really see what's happening if it's on paper in a way that you don't necessarily if you just listen to it again. I think it makes it, it's just... It's like a sledgehammer.
Yeah. Okay, that's a great idea. It's funny you say that. I just this semester we introduced a transcription task for our teachers, where they they choose a chunk of their lesson to transcribe and then kind of self-analyze that. But that's a great idea for me to transcribe myself, giving feedback. I don't have any more. I don't think I have any more feedback conferences this semester. That's something I'll definitely try next semester.
Yeah, I think I did it for myself recently, and I think it just is a very powerful tool because you don't see what you're saying necessarily, even listening back to the recording, and once it's there, the very you think you're being very you're eliciting from them, and you think that you're getting them to reflect, and actually then you look at it and you think, no, actually I'm telling them what to do, much more than I really want to. So I think often the principles that you have and that you hold dear and you think are valid aren't always necessarily what comes through, and sometimes you might think, well, actually no, that was the right thing to do, that's what they needed, and I think it worked well, and but sometimes you think, well, no, actually I really cut them off there. They were trying to say something and I had another agenda that I was trying to push. And sometimes timing's that, you've only got 30, 45 minutes, whatever, to get through this feedback, and you feel as if you've got to, make certain points. But again, as I say, it's always a juggling act, and that's why it's interesting. I mean, it's the most interesting thing I do, as well as the most challenging.
Okay, that's great. So can you just remind our listeners of the name of the website?
Okay, so it's called teacherfeedback.org. So teacherfeedback's one word, .org. And I'd really like to say, I'm hoping that the conversation will expand beyond, just sort of TEFL, actually, because I think that the same principles are true for all teacher educators or mentors, school-based mentors, where people are supporting new teachers in schools or whatever. I think all of those principles are very similar, and I think in some ways, in TEFL or TESOL, we tend to be quite insular, and we don't always look to a broader education agenda. And there's a lot there that we can learn from, I think. So that's my hope as well, that it'll be a broader thing.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. Well, thank you very much for talking to us today.
You're really welcome. Nice to talk to you.
Yeah, and hopefully some of our listeners will go and check out your website.
Lovely. Great. Thanks very much.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Thank you very much for listening to today's episode.
If you'd like to get in contact with us, please send an email to teflology@gmail.com, or you can follow us on Twitter @teflology. We'd also appreciate it if you could like our Facebook page, that's the Teflology Podcast on Facebook, and visit our website, teflology-podcast.com, where all our episodes are archived. The podcast is available on iTunes. You can also get it on Stitcher and Acast. So, thank you very much for listening. It's goodbye from me.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
We're on green. Thunderbirds are go.
All right.
But
The Milky Path are on
we
green.
might want to just finish off this discussion that we're midway through.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
We'll just wait for Rob to... It's hard to know how much time we've done on this. Like, I can't tell.
Yeah, well, that's all right. Just keep going.
Just keep it rolling.
can
It's
edit it
fine. I'll
later.
just have to edit all this. It's fine.
Yeah, well, welcome to my world. Are you recording over the top?
Fuck. Readjust the mic.
So-
Rob keeps moving around. So, look, since you've stopped editing, you don't really care where the mic is and stuff, do you, Rob?
You're gonna care.